At United Nations headquarters in New York, United States President Eisenhower arrives to make a proposal for the constructive use of atomic power.
I know that the American people share my deep belief that if a danger exists in the world, it is a danger shared by all. And equally, that if hope exists in the mind of one nation, that hope should be shared by all.
In my experience, arms control agreements are never as good as the advocates make out, and they're never as bad as the critics complain.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States has achieved something that decades of animosity has not: a comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
The supporters see it as a kind of traditional arms control agreement and recognize that both sides' interests have to be served. Many critics of this agreement, though, sort of saw this negotiation as a form of coercive diplomacy designed to disarm Iran.
And that is standing firm, ratcheting up the pressure until you get a better deal. And a better deal would roll back Iran's vast nuclear infrastructure and require Iran to stop its aggression in the region, its terror worldwide, and its calls and actions to annihilate the state of Israel.
And it's because of that sort of different interpretation of what this negotiation was all about that the agreement itself is so controversial.
Right now, based on the current trajectory of Iran's nuclear program, they could obtain enough material for a nuclear weapon in 2 to 3 months. Under this deal, that timeline pushes back to over 12 months. It also blocks Iran's pathway to nuclear weapons using plutonium for 15 years. And the monitoring and verification that's put on Iran is the most intrusive that a country has ever voluntarily agreed to adhere to. From a non-proliferation perspective, this is a strong deal, and it serves U.S. national security interests.
Iran's regional strategy is not just about the United States and this nuclear diplomacy and so forth. Iran has a regional strategy and poses serious threats to American interests. And there really isn't much sign that they're changing.
The official budget of the country is not where the funds for supporting terrorists comes from. That's not how it works. There is a completely different fund, and years of sanctions haven't changed anything to that.
Some 60 Americans, including our fellow citizen whom you just saw bound and blindfolded, are now beginning their 6th day of captivity inside the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. It's Friday morning.
The Iranians who are opposed to closer relations with America have a grievance list. And without endorsing the grievance list, it's important to know what it is.
The United States and its allies might take some action to preserve their oil lifeline in the Persian Gulf.
In 1988, shortly after the revolution, during the Iran-Iraq War, America, we know now, sided with Saddam Hussein, knowing that Saddam Hussein was using chemical weapons. And they know that we knew that, and we supported Saddam Hussein. So it makes a lot of what the Americans say about opposing the use of chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction, they hear it very cynically.
The most interesting thing about this agreement is the one thing that people are in some ways afraid to really discuss, and that is the long-run political and strategic implications of potential Iranian normalization internationally and specifically in the Middle East.
It's important to bear in mind that the regime in Iran, one of its core pillars is anti-Americanism. One question has to be, how likely do we think there's going to be this transformation inside Iran?
Regime change is not our strong suit. We really haven't done very well with it, even back to Mossadegh. And the notion that this agreement has to produce regime change to be successful is, again, another error.
So what are the results of this agreement? The results is a nuclear race in the Middle East with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and possibly others. And all these are building the nuclear know-how and skill set that will go into building the nuclear arsenals of the future Middle East multipolar nuclear environment.
Let's remember that we bring up this whole domino effect theory every time we're about to make very poor foreign policy decisions. But this deal brings a country back into compliance. It does that without a single shot being fired, and it does that with U.S. leadership.
On July 16, 1945, the United States set off the world's first atomic explosion. Atomic bombs today are more than 25 times as powerful as the weapons with which the atomic age dawned.
We're thinking in the United States election cycles, 2 years, 4 years. We're thinking quarterly reports of the corporations, whereas Iranians are thinking, like our Chinese friends and partners, they're thinking centuries. They're thinking the glory of the pre-Islamic Iranian, Persian empire.
And we have to be careful not to overstate Iran's power and, the return of the glory of the Persian Empire. Let's face it, getting Yemen doesn't get you back to the glory of the Persian Empire. This deal is about Iran's nuclear program. It is not about its human rights track record. It is not about its regional ambitions.
This agreement, in my view, has to have been based, and I believe it is, on plan for the worst and work for better. Secondly, it is very much in the Ronald Reagan tradition. Trust but verify.
So I think the question becomes then whether or not you agree with this deal, and I believe that this deal will be implemented. The question becomes, what can we do to strengthen the agreement within the next 15 years to ensure that when Iran gets to that point, it does not have the incentive to ramp up its nuclear program, and that other countries in the region do not feel like they have to achieve that level of parity.
There are I'll oversimplify, two different ways of looking at the U.S.-Iranian relationship. One is that they are fundamentally inimical and hostile to each other in the long run, and that this deal, therefore, strengthens a force that's going to be pernicious to us, pernicious to our allies, et cetera. The other is that the separation has been a kind of accident over the last 30-plus years after the Iranian Revolution and bad feelings, et cetera. Those are each is an oversimplified view, and we don't know the future.
Jim, one thing I've learned in my short career so far in foreign policy is that when you're asked about the future, the correct answer is I don't know.
Yes, wise man.
I worked long enough for Colin Powell to understand that. The point is we don't know. And one thing we are not doing well these days as a government is strategic planning. Thinking about the possibilities in the future and how do we prevent bad things from happening and how would we respond to them if they do happen.
Against the dark background of the atomic bomb, the United States does not wish merely to present strength, but also the desire and the hope for peace. The United States pledges before you, and therefore before the world, its determination to help solve the fearful atomic dilemma, to devote its entire heart and mind to find the way by which the miraculous inventiveness of man shall not be dedicated to his death, but consecrated to his life.